do that, I think like kind of the lesser known detail here is that you're essentially implementing software to do that work that's run by an individual, an entity, a company, whatever. Now SKALE took a different route, and we said, hey, we believe in blockchain. We believe there are some really, really great values of side chains, but there's also some really, really poor things about side chains about security. And so one of the poor things about traditional side chains is they have a fixed set of validators and nodes that run that are usually very small. And so collusion and bribery attacks, it's just, you lose a lot of your defense and game theory elements that protect traditional blockchains when you have just a very small set of people that are acting in a blockchain. And so the decision SKALE made was, hey, the value you get for a sidechain is that there's no complexity. You can just connect the things immediately. They talk back and forth really quickly. You don't have these data availability issues. You can create a phenomenal user experience by connecting into wallets through Web3.js, just basically being directly connected to the end user without timeouts and all these other kind of UX issues that we see in the kind of enterprise software version of layer 2. And so, and with a central operator. So SKALE is built and designed to have a large set of nodes, and then through random selection, randomly define which nodes operate in the chain and then rotate them. And so you get this really big pool, but whoever runs your chain, it's going to be different. Each month it will look different, and each month the initial set is pulled from a very large pool. And so and then there's also a stake. And so if you act maliciously, you lose a lot of money if you're running a node. And so this randomness, rotation, and incentives allows for not the same security issues you would have with traditional side chains, but it gives you a lot of the advantages you would get with traditional side chains. But on top of that, SKALE has some other, I think really nice things around consensus and BLS threshold signatures that allow for optimized performance. But that was a big piece of it. And the big part of that bet was, will there be a validator ecosystem? And I think in 2016, 2017, no one knew that. It was just seemed like, well, miners, like what are the mining pools doing, right? And now there's this mature, robust, evolving validator ecosystem, and that really makes running BFT, Byzantine fault tolerant blockchains, a secure practice. And so it opens up things like SKALE and what we see with other networks that are popping up that frankly aren't having major security issues. I haven't seen anyone steal a bunch of money from Cosmos yet, and that's a proof of stake BFT blockchain. So I think the world's changing, and this design choice we feel is really good because at the end of the day, we give developers what they need, how they need it, and at the price they want it for themselves and their users. It's what the SKALE Network tries to do.
Yeah, I think that was very helpful for our audience. Thank you for your explanation. Jack, as you said, the world is changing, but overall, both of you mentioned that more adoption is critical in the crypto space. What do you think is missing in DeFi today to reach the next level of mass adoption? And what are you doing to achieve this goal? Jack, can you get us started?
Yes. So when I think about DeFi is it's just still crawling, and I like to use the crawl, walk, run analogy. There's some amazing things happening though, and we're seeing this money Lego world come together where we can have full liquidity and pooling of risk and assurance around risk and automated market making. It's really impressive to see what's happening, but I think we're still in the early stages of use cases. A lot of these use cases are around crypto on crypto loans, and I think it'll be really interesting where we start seeing other world loans come in, and maybe not mortgages for a long time because of the nature and the importance and the length of a lot of those loans, but there are other shorter term loans that aren't just about gamification and trading of crypto assets to crypto assets. And I think when we get there, we're going to get to the next tier. But what we're building now are requirements to help all these other components come together. And I actually think DeFi will support the Web3 movement when Web3 really starts rocking later, because you have this liquidity backend, that smart contract run, as opposed to being only done through central gateways. So I'm excited about it. Excited to see what will come over the next 6 months, 12 months. It'll be interesting.
Sounds great. So what are you doing to reach the next level of mass adoption?
Yeah, so I think in terms of DeFi, if you look at the everyday user, what they want, the types of products that they want is pretty simple, right? So they want to be able to earn a passive income that's higher than what they can get from the commercial bank. And right now is a really good opportunity to do that because interest rates for commercial banks have basically tanked. They like the ability to buy price exposure to lots of different assets. So it could be real estate, it could be stocks, it could be commodities. And like all situations considered, they like the ability to be able to borrow capital to be able to do 1 and 2, right? So these are the properties of DeFi that should be supported in the long term. So today, I think the problem is that there's like a lot of interesting things that are happening in DeFi, but there's basically no analogs to the traditional finance space. So, you have this ability to lever up on tokens. You can buy, either spot or levered up price exposure to Bitcoin, Ethereum, and lots of wrap tokens. But there isn't ability to buy exposure to lots of real world assets. And there isn't really a way to borrow money in a way that isn't fully crypto collateralized. And this last piece is also pretty important as well, because like, for example, if I'm a farmer in Malaysia, I mean, you're not banking the unbanked by giving this person the ability to borrow money on fully collateralized Bitcoin loans, right? Because he's not going to have Bitcoin anyway. So some sort of like social proof under collateralized crypto-based loans is definitely something that's missing in DeFi as well. Of course, it's like a lot of infrastructure questions that needs to be solved before DeFi can mature. But in my mind, I think it's a question of going back to the drawing board and defining financial products that are really simple to understand and are analogous to what users can get in the real world, except with a couple of properties that are different. So better accessibility, better rates, and things like that. And at Terra, that's most of the things that we're focusing on now. Through Anchor, we're trying to create a better interest rates on passive income. We're trying to create a better synthetic price exposure to assets through something called the Mirror Protocol. We're also working on something interesting with under collateralized lending, but it's probably too early to share. Yeah.
I agree with Jack and Do that the blockchain world needs to review its fundamental assumptions. Right now, I see a difference between the real world and the virtual world powered by blockchain. In the real world, I largely see production before finance. But in the blockchain world, I see much more financial activities before basing the real value from production. Historically, for example, a farmer would want to take out a loan to buy more farmland or cows to increase his production. Finance here makes sense only because there is an underlying production. In blockchain, however, we are missing this underlying asset of farmland or cows, but the financial infrastructure is there to leverage itself, which is why we are seeing lots of ICOs, but not enough tangible product. This is a critical point, I think, and we base a lot of our investment to solve this pain point. I think we need more projects to create real value, whether it is through games or entertainment or contents in blockchain ecosystem, so that the financial infrastructure can become more robust. So the next question is, why do you think much more progress has been made in finance instead of creating more blockchain-based service? And when do you think we can start seeing this blockchain gaming or service available to the general public? Jack, if you could answer first.
Okay, great. So, hey, this is a phenomenal question. It's something I've been talking a lot to people about recently. And it's really, I think, what is the onset of 3? Like, when are we going to see blockchains start making a disruption in either centralized businesses more centralized businesses using blockchains and Web3 to compete with other centralized competitors. So, so now I'll start though by saying DeFi, I think DeFi got to a point of success because you could finally have a user experience for the captive audience or the market share that was ready to use DeFi that worked for them. Now, if you have to pay $10 to, you know, mint your synthetics assets, you're still going to do it, okay? If you have to pay $10 to move, you know, move out a loan out of a balancing pool, you're going to do it, okay? It's fine. And if the transaction takes 15 seconds, it's okay. So what happened is we got to the point with Ethereum where we were able to build user experiences that still worked with high latency and really high costs for a market that cared, okay? Now, I think there's still a massive market that cares, and Doe had a good point, just around a savings account. And I think, you know, as we start, DeFi grows up and we're gonna have less risky, but still higher returning savings vehicles, because we don't have brick and mortar banks. We don't have people working at these places doing sales and et cetera. Like we're using smart contracts, okay? And so I think we'll keep evolving. But I also think that, you know, again, we need to have a component, an injection of real world value. And if you think about our daily lives, like what do we spend money on, right? And the things we spend money on at some point need to be paid in crypto or be something that's crypto you're buying. And there's a lot of things we all spend money on as opposed to just crypto on crypto, which also has a place and it's exciting, but I really feel like the user experience with latency, block times, having really mature stable tokens, which now we're seeing really come into fruition here, all of these things are needed in order to get us to a Web3 world where you do have a user experience that meets the audience where they need to be met. Like I need to be able to opt in, you know, with my phone. I don't want to have to like do all this crypto stuff that we like doing, but we know our friends and our relatives who don't do crypto don't like doing that stuff. I need to be able to then use products that have reasonable user experiences and ones that I'm used to. And I think as that all comes together and SKALE, that's our goal, is to make sure that user experience and price component can be there to make crypto work. But I think we're going to have hundreds of millions of users and a lot of use cases, and which makes DeFi even more powerful because they're able to pull in assets that have real world usage of things we actually spend our money on. Normal people spend their money on. So that's my perspective. And I think to be honest, I think we're really close, like within 6 months of seeing a massive outbreak of success of Web3 products.
Thank you. So you have talked about products that the consumer wants, such as saving.
소비자들이 원하는 뭐 예금이나 투자 계좌에 대해서 말씀하셨는데,
what other service do you think would drive more adoption for the general public?
더 많이 사람들이 사용할 만한 서비스는 어떤 것들이 있다고 생각하십니까?
Is it just me, or can you hear the Korean translation?
Yeah, I think the Korean translation got injected into this chat. So,
Okay.
Can you hear
Well,
me still?
yeah, I can hear you still. Yeah.
Elenita, we can hear you now. So, technical difficulties. Sorry, everybody. We can keep it going. We can just do non-simultaneous interpretation. We'll talk, translate. How about that?
Simon, can you quickly repeat the question?
Oh yes, so you talked about financial product on top of Terra. So what other service do you think would drive more adoption for the general public outside of financial sector or financial product?
Yeah, so I'm interested in sort of a couple of different things, and I think, you know, thematically they sort of coalesce outside of finance. They coalesce around two different things. So number one, I think blockchains are really good when you're trying to solve large scale coordination problems. So for example, if you're trying to put together like a massive donation, for instance, then I think you can solve social problems by using blockchain technology to do that rather than centralized services. when you are, trying to put together like an election. I think right now blockchains aren't mature enough to, let's say, handle like a national presidential election, for instance, because network security isn't expensive enough to secure, let's say, the U.S. presidential elections, for instance. But I think it can be used for things like, sort of a unbiased census of what people are feeling about the different issues that are going on within a country. So this could be like an unpoliticized, unadulterated, election of people's sentiment on lots of different issues. And you can even have like pricing schemes that are built on top of this. On the other end of the spectrum, I'm pretty interested in like games. So I think one of the things that, in South Korea, the gaming industry did really well is that a lot of the novel, concepts and technology and gamifications that we used in, let's say, e-commerce and payments today was actually first developed in, the leading games of the country. So things like MapleStory, Paramenara, different massive multiplayer online games like that. So I think sort of games with large user bases, interesting incentive systems, persistent wealth being generated, such as like NFTs, is a really interesting industry to look forward to as blockchain scale over the next 3 years.
Yeah.
And Simon, before we go to the next question, I want to add to that too. Like one of the things I always think about is, and then you brought this up with the election scenario, and there's things that we're just not ready for yet because there is a cost to trusting a blockchain. Okay, and it's like, and so right now there's the cost of just trusting one operator. Like we'll say, hey, we're going to trust the government. They're going to keep track of this stuff, and people are okay with that. The costs of trusting the blockchain are that blockchains work in a, with game theory, and will 2/3 of these operators not be bad, right? Will in a proof of work, are we sure that never greater than 51% will be bad, right? And so there's some things though where that just isn't even an issue, and it adds value, and those are the areas where it's just an immediate value, where you can have large-scale coordination with complexity that like Doe was talking about, where you're ready to just participate in gaming. Yeah, gaming's a sweet spot. I think gaming's going to be there's a lot of cool stuff being worked on right now, and I think we're going to see a gaming boom over the next 6 months.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the gaming with DAO-backed kinds of new economy in the blockchain space.
Yeah.
So to the next question. We believe custody and wallet solutions are the key to mass adoption in Korea and Asia. What step is each project taking to capture this opportunity? Jack, perhaps you can get us started with your APK or SDK solutions.
Yeah, so another, I think, big bet we made when we were thinking like, hey, what's going to happen in terms of the market? I think there's amazing stuff popping up all over the world, but we were thinking, will the Ethereum developer ecosystem boom from a tooling perspective? And today we announced 40 integration partners and partners of different categories. And really, it's incredibly easy for Scale to integrate everywhere because of the Ethereum compatibility. So the Scale tokens, ERC77 token, and that's because the mainnet the Ethereum mainnet is where it's almost like a brain. It's called the Scale Manager, and what it does is it determines through a lot of cryptography in conjunction with the nodes in the network of what nodes go where, who works on which dApp, and it does orchestration, administration, and payments. It also pays validator operators. People that stake, it gets staked in the Ethereum mainnet. If you buy a chain or rent a chain, you pay and scale into the Ethereum mainnet. So Ethereum's the back end. And so it's just really easy for us. You just instant interoperability with anything Ethereum, because EVM lives on each chain, and everything in SKALE is ERC 20 backwards compatible through the ERC 777. So we had a lot easier than other people that had to design and build a lot of their own tooling, wallets, and network and ecosystem. And Summit, I think you've seen Terra do it phenomenally well. I'd love to hear their secrets because they have one of the most used blockchains in the world, from my understanding. So I'd like to hear what they did. But we thankfully didn't have to do much.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Tell us about the synergy between Terra and Chai and some of the other opportunities or partnership with the other wallets or custody these days.
Yeah, so before we talk about Terra and Chai, what's really interesting is that we're reliving a lot of the evolution that fintech mobile wallets lived through in the early to mid 2000s today in blockchain. So I remember when I first went to college in 2010, there were lots of different, fintech wallets that were raising money in Silicon Valley. And then they were mainly competing on the vectors of user experience. So there wasn't sort of any unique features behind each of these wallets, but basically you had lots of different wallets that were competing on how pretty their buttons were or how friendly their tutorials. And you had named VCs like go up in front of the press and talk about how user friendly these different wallets are. But then today, like fintech user experience in fintech is mostly played out, if you will. So if you look at the user experience that Square Cash App offers versus, let's say, Venmo or PayPal, Alipay, WeChat Pay, I think they're all pretty competitive. They do have differences, but I don't think you would pick one wallet over another, depending on how strong their user interface or design qualities are. A lot of the differentiation in fintech happens around commercial terms. So, for example, how many merchants does this thing hook up to? What sorts of features does this wallet have? Like, does it offer me more benefits? Does it offer me more kickbacks or promotions? And then the same thing happened in the credit card industry as well. So when Visa and MasterCard first rolled out, the main question was around how many different wallets or how many different merchants would accept my card. And sort of that's where American Express lost the battle. But then, today it's accepted that merchant acceptance is ubiquitous. And then all of these different credit cards are competing on commercial vectors. Like how much benefits can this card offer me? Like how many airline miles, how much discounts to Starbucks. So basically the narrative changes from very simple user experience-based concerns to something that's a little bit more sophisticated. So like multi-year or decade-long retention patterns or schemes that these companies can offer to their customers. And I see similar patterns play out in crypto wallets and custody providers. So in crypto wallets, like most of the benefits that top wallets offer their communities is support for the assets that they want, which is mainly a coverage question. And then secondly, there are starting to be some promotions, especially on the exchanges. So for doing user promotions around token airdrops, if you will. So a lot of the wallets are starting to, are still mainly competing on user experience and user interfaces, but they're starting to compete on some of the commercial interfaces. Going forward for the next 3 years, a pattern that I see is the dialogue will shift more and more towards competing on commercial vectors of what these wallets can do with different assets, but these benefits will start to become repackaged, right? So instead of just doing token airdrops, these wallet providers might try to negotiate with service providers like Netflix or Starbucks to get preferred pricing for payments for payments that are made through their respective wallets. So you're going to see repackaged commercial benefits. And that's sort of what we do at Chai through the Terra network as well, right? So now that we are starting to have lots and lots of different scale, like in the beginning, we used to pay for most of the user kickbacks and promotions and benefits, but we're transitioning to a model where now that we have the user base, we're using some of the cash flows that are happening within the network and the system to offer merchants a way to compete for revenue lift by offering users promotions. So that's sort of the main growth drivers for Chai and Terra at the moment, where merchants offer promotions to different users. Users come into the application to check out different types of promotions, and then based on that, that creates a virtuous cycle where merchants are providing more and more promotions dollars to the service, and then users are using the service more and more based on these promotions. So quite excited to see how the wallet and custody business is moving going forward.
Hey, Joe, I've got a if you don't mind, I've got a question for you. So I remember I was trying to sign up for like an E-Trade account or a Scottrade or something back in like 2005. And it was so painful. I had to send in a physical voided check. I had to do all this stuff. And I was just like, I just gave up. I just didn't do it. It was too painful. And then like fast forward, a handful of years later, like Plaid is a thing, right? And Plaid is this back-end connector between every, trading interface or wallet and different banking institutions. And immediately, like I was like 3 minutes, I was set up on Robinhood because I think they're using Plaid on the back end. And there's this, and so, I'm wondering, is there going to be a like Plaid of crypto where we have, either a set of protocols or open standards or companies that are going to make a lot of money by going out and building the rails and the connectors to help all these systems come together? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, absolutely. So I think mostly this is not really a user interface design question, but I think it's mostly a regulatory question. So with all credit to guys at E-Trade, when they were first trying to construct systems like this, they were probably one of the first in the market, which is why when they went to talk to regulators about it, they probably said, this is something that we don't want to deal with, which is probably why they came up with such a convoluted system of having to send voided checks. So when Plaid launched for the first time, actually, I think, most interpretations of US law would say that the methodologies that they were using were illegal, but it became possible because Mint first created the methodology of using the headless browser to get the user's ID and password, and then just basically spoofing user's existence through the headless browser mechanism to log into a user's bank account information vicariously, right? So once you start to have lots of different players that are wanting to do the same thing, then I think that's when regulators decide to get clever and then come up with different ways in which a better user experience can be offered. So right now, I think it's a little bit early. I think there's a couple of players that are trying to knock down doors. We're doing some of that in Korea with Hash. I think Coinbase is trying to do that in the US, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time. But once there is a sufficient number of players saying that this is the financial innovation that needs to happen, I think that's when regulations and best practices are going to evolve to accommodate the types of user experiences that we need to exist.
Okay, I have a final question. So two projects here are representing the East and the Western market, I think. And it would be great to hear directly from you to share thoughts on development in the West Silicon Valley adoption and growth in Asia. So, what's your strategy to expand your territory to the West?
Yeah, so Terra is fairly distributed at this point. I think about 20 to 25% of our headcount is working outside of Seoul. We are in the process of setting up an office outside of Asia. It's kind of got stymied because of COVID, but that's going to happen soon. But basically, I think one of the best things about working in blockchain is that by necessity of having to include the community in the discussion, a lot of the business and engineering development has to happen in highly documented and distributed format. So which means that your company is able to go global, maybe not from day one, but very soon from day one. So you are actually able to hire people from, let's say, Belarus or the US, and given sufficient maturity in the types of people that you work with, that doesn't cause any problems in sort of driving the adoption of whatever that you happen to be working on at the moment. In terms of the end products, a lot of the things that we're creating in the second half of 2020 are geared towards markets outside of Asia. So Anchor is going to predominantly, with the exception of Chai, predominantly launch in the US. So that's kind of interesting. But I think, one of the things that's interesting about Korea is that the market's starting to become a lot smaller after 2017. But I think it drove out a lot of speculators, and people that are genuinely interested in the industry are increasing in number. So in terms of the total caliber of discussions, even the quality of the traders, I think it's going up over time. So that's something that we see that's super positive, and we've been working with a lot of talent that's been wanting to get their hands into blockchain for the first time. So at least in the Korean market, I think a lot of the things that are happening are super positive.
Thank you. And now you, Jack, what's your strategy to expand in Asian market?
Yeah, so one thing I think is really interesting about crypto is to be successful, and I think this is true of all the successful crypto networks and projects and communities, the core team and supporting teams, you just have to be really global. So Doe and I used to see each other, and Simon, you and I've seen you guys in how many cities around the world? I don't even know, because we were always on planes going to different hacker events and blockchain events, right? And that's just part of the, the work and the effort is you've got to get up early and get on airplanes and be jet lagged, but you end up covering a lot of the globe and you can build a lot of advocacy, community, get customers, partners, open source contributors, et cetera. So it is a very global game and a global effort. And you can see from the user perspective, I think if you looked at where tokens are around the world and who's participating, like it's very, very global, obviously. And I think